Ladies and gentlemen, now it gives me a great pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker for today. I hope that you are as excited as I am. It really excited because of her profile, excited because of the topic that is so relevant to all of us today. I think we are all can learn so much from this. I'm introducing Dr. Ameena Ali, who's the founder and consul general of Federation of International Gender and Human Rights. Now, Dr. Amina has got many accolades on her belt, under her belt, and her profile is really intimidating to me, at least. I need to be honest. I'm just going to a little bit about Dr. Amina. She's the founder and consul general, as I said, of the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights. This social impact organization was founded in New York as a sovereign consulate with a mission to make specific and international protocol, protections, and provisions for gender and human rights, inclusively affordable and attainable to all indigent and undeserved communities of domestic and foreign percentage. She is retired as a naturopathic doctor specializing in obstetric and gynecology and has been in organic medicine, home birthing, and maternal education for over 30 years. And as I said, many accolades under her belt. In November 2019, she received assignment and was newly appointed a special consultative status as the Director of Women's Empowerment for the UN Department of Economic and Social Council, the Northern Citizen of Community Board. What I love on her profile specifically is that, but her best accomplishment is being a Muslim mother of now and adult daughters, and now Nana as well, claiming 13 grandchildren with one born just one day after her birthday in August 2019, just a month before we had our first global conference. I present to you guys Dr. Ameena Ali. It is a great pleasure to welcome you, Dr. Ameena. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I apologize for my tardiness. I'm going through radiation right now, so it's a personal journey of redemption and recovery. So I was a bit tardy this morning, and I thank you so very much for allowing me to still speak from a very shaken voice, but a very powerful, powerful spirit. I have to pivot the conversation just a tad bit. It is since my recent diagnosis with breast cancer last year that I've taken a small hiatus from dutiful work to mission-filled work. And part of that is allowing me to understand that after my breasts were removed and after my ascension into this next level of what life is to look like, there was a bit of introspection, of course, that had to be taken. There also had to be a bit of knowledge that had to be gained and wisdom to impart. And some of the things that I was looking at in my leadership was not necessarily my past tasks and things that you can read off of a bio. But what is my intention right now? What is my true transparency and focal attention in leadership right now? It's very easy to put on a title and speak through a rank or privilege or even status in the UN or AU or even ECOWAS. But what are we really bringing to the table when we speak or when we offer and ordain our mission and purpose with each other? So this pivot may be a little hard and rough around the edges, but I pray that it will be welcomed by everyone to understand that this is really the catalyst for greater change, not because it's my opinion, but because I think it's, as I mentioned to Ingrid, it is the pink elephant in the room that we have to begin to address and begin to see in a more comfortable way. So prayerfully, my words will bring you comfort in bringing this forward. Now, that pink elephant in the room, of course, is privilege. And this is something that most of us speak through and don't even realize that our unconscious bias is bringing us tales of prosperity and positivity, professionalism, and even growth. Has to deal with your access to privilege. What we used to say in the past is not, well, we say it now. It's not what you know, it's who you know. When my parents were growing up, it was the education that you had to have in order to get ahead. But now, the story is, who's your daddy? Who's your mommy? Who's the one that is helping you to bring forth this excellence that you have? Who is the one that sponsors you? Who is in your network that begins your net worth in how you present yourself in society? So that privilege is seen as a dysfunction in certain areas. I know when we talk about race relations and we get sensitive in that, we always talk about rank and status and role and who is where and who has the greater influence. And we even have a new word, it's called influencer, which I don't even know what an influencer is. I thought everyone that had a brain was influential in some way. But now there's a title, there's a genre, there's a thing that speaks to some professionalism that we have to expert ourselves in. And I even hate that word because expert means that you're the best in that topic, and that's not true. So for when we use these words, when we use this language, it's all of privilege. We feel as though we can use these words because society has allowed us to use this and give us comfort in this status. Well, I'm here to rip that Band-Aid off today because there are women around the world that don't need your status and your accolades. They need your hands-on work. They need you to privilege them into an understanding that they are equally as important as your status and your privilege. So we're going to talk a little bit for about 5 minutes on ways that we can soften the blow and begin to transition or pivot, since that's the new in vogue word, into a way to begin to surface this goodness. Now, how does that look? That looks like a word that we automatically know. What face do we put on? And I like to use this analogy, and actually it's FACE, it's actually an acronym. FACE means it's FACE, and there are 4 words that we start talking about when we talk about this pink elephant and reducing privilege and rising up in the understanding of what we need to do in our work. Now, I noticed how everyone else was speaking and everyone had their camera on. Now, when I start talking about this pink elephant, I notice everyone kindly goes and gets some tea or fixes their makeup. And I notice the cameras are gone. So I will speak to you in a gentle voice, and prayerfully it won't be too harmful. So maybe you can return and see this as a vision in goodness rather than something to avoid, because this is what happens. We avoid this pink elephant. And we're afraid of talking about this because it's painful. It stirs up legacy in the past that may not be comfortable. It stirs up behaviors and manners that we may not want to atone or maybe even account for. But what I like to see is that this face that we put on will allow us to see that this is possible for us to transition into goodness without it really even being seen. Something that we can do kind of unconsciously, consciously, and be able to do it subtly so that it's brought into the picture without anyone seeing our past or the negativity of what our privilege has brought us. So let's talk about the first letter in FACE. FACE, F-A-C-E, is forgiveness. Simple. Or is it? Forgiveness is the formal release from obligation, guilt, or punishment. Now, if we look at that definition really closely, the formal release from obligation, guilt, or punishment means we don't hold the past as your greatest thought or your greatest action. We don't hold the grandparents of the slave owners of my grandmother, my great-grandmother, accountable for what their grandchildren now do to us now. My last name, my maiden name is Bell, which is very German. So clearly that was not of my roots. But what we realize is that those that owned us, those that gave us the name Bell, did so because those times required them economically to have us in their possession. Now, as free persons, we are now able to set a tone for our own lineage and our own greatness of dynasty. But knowing that that was in my past, we as a family got together and we forgave the Bell family. The Bell family of Wiesbaden, Germany. We traced it back and we found out that we were from the Bell family in Riyadh. I keep saying Riyadh because we have a lineage in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, but in Wiesbaden, Germany. And we collectively got together as a group, as a family reunion, and we dedicated that reunion to the forgiveness of the Bell family. And we said we were going to, some of us still hold the name Bell. But what we're going to do is we're going to forgive you for doing this to our family, for taking our lineage and our name, taking our sponsorship and who we were integrally. So that released them of any obligation. So if we ever meet a future Belle in our family, if we ever know the great grandson of our slave owner, we don't hold that animosity anymore because they didn't do anything. So that's the first step that we had to do, is forgiveness. This is a conscious and deliberate decision to release resentment or vengeance to someone who hurt or harmed us intentionally. This is also giving forgiveness to someone that never asked for it. How courageous is that? This is also a point that leads us to point 2, which is the A in faith. This is atonement. Atonement is reparations for a wrong or injury. This is repairing the act. Now, in the African American community, every time we hear reparations, we always think, oh, there's money attached to this. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Just like when you're in the church and you talk about tithes and offerings. Tithes and offerings doesn't have to come in money. It can come in stewardship, in benevolence, or just kindness toward others. It doesn't have to come in money. Stop always looking for money. What we need to look at is we have to look at how they right the wrong. If someone has the privilege, then they need to begin to welcome and include those into that privileged circle. That is a way to build the posterity of a people. That is how other generations brought posterity to their community, by getting attached to other people and letting them rise up. Case in point, look at the Italians. They came here, they set up their shop. We call it the Italian families, as we'll do it on a nice saying. We use the Italian families. They brought in the Irish. They brought in some of the Jews. They brought in some of the traditions that were other communities and helped them to rise up in status. So what we need to do is understand that those that have the privilege have the responsibility and the accountability to now bring in the atonement to those that don't have, including them, not just adding on. That is a difference. When you add someone on, it's like, oh, we're planning this and you can come. Yeah, that's not cool anymore. Inclusion means we're planning this, come to the table during the planning. Let's begin to include people in the planning rather than add them on to the celebration. It doesn't feel good when you're asked to come to the party. What feels good is to know that you are part of the logistics of the party, because then our culture, our tradition, our heritage, our language, and even some of the authenticity of us as a people is included in that party. So we don't have to feel like we have to shapeshift and adjust to the fever of what the community or the event is having. We can bring our own authenticity and be ourselves because we were included in the logistics. So that's atonement. The C is contrition. Contrition. This is the reconciliation, which is different than atonement. The reconciliation is understanding that there is remorse in what we're dealing with in face value. No, you didn't do this. You weren't a part of the current Bell family. You didn't enslave us as people from the Republic of the Gambia. You didn't take us on and make us work your lands. No, you didn't do that. What you did is you continued the privilege and the entitlement through how you act in society, okay? So the contrition is stepping back and realizing that just because you have the power doesn't mean you have to own the power. Power is like energy. It can be dispersed. It can be delegated. It also can be given to other people and still not lessen your shine. So that contrition is the restoration of friendly relations. And as my notes read, it is similar to understanding how children play. Now, here's the thing. You know how children play, 1 minute, that's my ball, give it back to me, don't take this, and stop hitting me, and that type thing. And then 5 minutes later, they're the best of friends. They're hugging, they're loving, they're sharing their toys, they're feeding each other cookies, they're feeding each other's cookies, and wet and mushy as they are, they're still sharing it. Why? Because children don't hold on to anger and pain. Remember, we talked about forgiveness, a conscious and deliberate decision to release resentment and vengeance to someone that harmed you. So this is how children play. So why do they grow up into adults that hold grudges? That's because there's more actions and behaviors learned behaviors of holding grudges than there is of releasing them. There's more adults that hold grudges and hold animosities and get mad because of one situation. Now I'm mad at Ingrid for the rest of my life. No, no. If Ingrid, it'll never happen, but if Ingrid and I ever get to ill discussion, we're adults. We can say, yes, I agree, and agree to agree respectfully, or agree to disagree respectfully. That doesn't change the sisterhood. It just changes and helps us to learn each other a little bit better. So acts of contrition is learning how to be a child again, learning how to love through the difficulties and still giving a hug at the end of that situation. That is a great formula for how we are to lead in tomorrow and how we are to teach our children so that they can leave a legacy of learning this as a real-time event. They don't have to go through the relearning after all of the pain that we have dealt with in our age. I know I'm 50 something, and I know that when we come into this understanding of who we are, we have to unlearn certain behaviors. But that doesn't mean it's going to be hard. But if learning new behaviors will allow us to begin to see this and teach this by example, they won't have to ever touch that. Our children won't ever have to know how to unlearn something because all they will know is this relearning by example that we're showing. So the last piece is the E. So we have forgiveness, F, atonement, A, contrition, C, and E is expiation. Now, if you're 1% religious, you've heard that word, expiation of sins, expiation of your behaviors, expiation of anything. If you are any part of a spiritual realm, this word is association with impermanence, which is the letting go. This is the not holding on, not allowing this to be a permanent part, releasing the concrete, returning it to sand, all of the analogies that we use when we talk about expiating something, okay? This is the act of making amends for guilt or wrongdoing. So this is saying out loud, one, like Miriam Anderson said, I will no longer do this in my life. And having everyone in the family repeat that again. I will no longer do this in my life, and repeat whatever that thing is. And you hear yourself saying this out loud. You hear yourself understanding what you're saying, and you listen to the words intently. I will no longer do this in my life. Now that could be not including people, seeing people in a certain light, reducing people because of your history of who you think they are, or even listening to the rhetoric of what you believe people are based on news media or social media or however people are fathomed. It tickles me when I hear non-Muslims talk about Muslims and what we do and how we do it. And they want to be experts in Islam, and yet they're of Christian faith, or they're of Jewish faith, or some other denomination. And I'm like, that's like having a man say, I know what it's like to give birth, you know? And I always use that analogy because it's like, how can you speak of another tradition if you're not of that, living that, being that, and surviving through that? How can you speak of it? You can speak on it, but not through it. So that single story is where we're going to start. The single story act of redemption. Stop speaking for other people. Their voice is enough. Their voice is enough. And I'm speaking as a woman that is African American, that is of an African heritage, that is a Black woman in North America, that is a Black woman Muslim post 9/11, and that is a U.S. Gulf War veteran post Gulf War. I speak from those vessels of truth and experience, and my voice is enough. I don't need anyone to speak for me or speak for veterans of Gulf War when you could just put me on and let people hear verbatim. Stop speaking for other people. Stop giving the reference that you know more of for them than they know for themselves. Then change the behavior in your action and intention. So now do it for other people. And one of the things that I do when I speak, I don't read people's bios. I let people tell me who they are. It's real easy to read a bio about what you did, but I want you to speak on who you are. So changing the behavior and intention is letting people speak and tell who they are. It's easy I can read a bio. I can go to your LinkedIn and read a bio. Most of us here is on LinkedIn. I can just read whatever you wrote and just know something about you. But I want to hear who Bonnie is. I want to know what Nawal is doing right now in her life. I want to know more about Ingrid. I know enough to love her like I do, but I want to know who she is. What is her passions? What are her goals? What are some of the things she wants to do before she hits 50? Like, what are some of the things that she is going to do on a bucket list? I need to know that, because that meshes our passions, our missions, our purpose. And the very last thing, and this is something that deals with the new in vogue term of mental health. This is getting help to change the behavior. So many of us think, all we have to do is just stop doing this thing and start doing this thing. No, it's not that easy sometimes. Some things are inbred in us. That is a learned thing. That is a behavior that we didn't think was wrong until we got grown and realized that that was inappropriate. These are things that is in us. And if you're over 50, it's pretty concrete right now. We got to chop away to get to that sand again. So what we need to do is realize that there's help out there to help us to do this. Reduce the pride, reduce the ego, reduce the anger, reduce the putting your hands on your hips mentality, where you feel like you don't have to do this and you want to stand for this thing where I don't need to go to counseling. You might need to. And the one that resists the most is normally the one that needs it the most. So know that getting help to change your behavior is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. If we're changing our leadership and we're being the face of leadership, we as women have to realize that this is pivotal. I don't care if you're in education, if you're in mathematics, technology, science, any of the STEM, stream, whatever we are, we have to understand who is the human behind the effort. And if that human is flawed, nothing about your leadership can hold water. So we have to understand who we are. Better the human for greater humanity. That is our aim for 2022. That is going to be our mission and focus for the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights. And that is going to be our mission focus for the entire year. Better the human, the better humanity. And if you can use that hashtag, I ask that you, I froze a little bit, I apologize. If you can use that hashtag, I ask that you keep it going, better the human to better humanity, so that we can keep this going and keep this as an in vogue conversation and pivot to greatness. I thank you and I appreciate you, and humanity will be better for you.